And that means that if they can get this kind of mentor image, which I'm trying to put forward with Dusty, they can find that and hear this story about a mentor who himself is growing, and this gets out into the world and people actually latch onto it, this might actually help someone who is going through the same issues. Because Dusty, like, he starts out suicidal and he ends up with an anxiety issue and goes forward and is kind of sorting himself out. But that means that I can help someone. And I, for years, growing up Pentecostal, the drive is evangelize. I'm just like, I'm not good at that. Like, talking to people about this stuff and like trying to argue my points and that kind of thing. I was like, I'm really not good at it. My best friend is agnostic, and like, we've had very few conversations about this because the few conversations we get into, I wait for him to ask a good question, and that's happened, and I've had good conversations, but I don't push him. And so
but
I'm like,
demonstrate it.
Yeah,
demonstrate your faith in your actions. Like, I can tell, like, for instance, you've got those right questions for why you're writing the book, and just the fact that you're concerned to help people who are suicidal and have anxiety, like, I don't pick up from you that you want to do that because you see it's a growing market and you could, make all kinds of money and one day.
No, I do want to make money. This is supposed to be my job, but I don't want to be Stephen King.
Right.
I just want to get by and help people at the same time.
It seems to me like you want to live a good life, like under God good, like you're trying your best to be a good person. And that to me shows, and you doing that will demonstrate more about how to relate to God than hours and hours of scripture. Because, and one thing I've noticed recently, with as much as I love all the conversations going on in the IDW and the ILW, and like our talk with Pajot was lots of fun, but we've gotten a bit caught up at different fingers and understanding different people's symbol sets. And there's a very basic way of interacting with God and love and life that doesn't require any of that. You can be illiterate and have a profound connection to your fellow beings, to nature, and to God in the simplest way. And I don't see any of that discussion going on. We're having fun doing the intellectual shit, and which is great. Like, it's a wonderful to have what we're doing. I'm just seeing the lack of the other end. And in you, Kevin, I'm not seeing you discuss it at all. You're participating in that discussion, yet I see you living what we're not talking about. Andrea as well. That's one of the reasons I love you so much and have put so much like energy into you, is you're living well. You've got a beautiful connection to God, and yes, you're wrestling with it and everything, but nobody's discussing that side of it. So I see you both living it, but we're not discussing that simpler side of aiming at the good and discussing it on a more grounded level. And I have a feeling, Kevin, you demonstrate that to your agnostic friend.
Well, thank you. I hope that's the case. And I'm also in that same camp where I'm worried about it as far as intellectualism goes, because something that Voth said, he put his book into one of those reading comprehension checkers, and it said it was like off the chart thing, because there was so many big ideas and huge words and long sentences and that kind of stuff. And he's like, man, nobody's gonna read this and nobody's gonna get this, because it's just I'm using the language I'm using is too highfalutin and educational. It's like, it's the same thing. It's the Vervaeke problem of his religion that's not a religion. I'm just like, I'm hearing a lot of big words. I'm not seeing a lot of practicality. So the thing that I was trying to help him with before he passed was, I was trying to help him speak to everyone else. because he could speak to me, because he was right there with me reading the book, and he could tell me what he means by these things. But I got to be able to pick that out without him there. And now I literally have to do that without him there. And so that's got to come across. And that's not going to happen with all this intellectualism and all of these debates on Discord and all this stuff. It's just like I had a talk with Sherry on mysticism, and she kept asking what the definition of mysticism was, and I felt like that asking for the definition was bogging down the talk of just trying to figure out how to have some proper mysticism. It's just like, well, let's define it. It's like, well, it's like all these talks where they try to define truth at the beginning of the talk. It's like, yes, that's extremely important, but I would really rather you just have the talk.
That's a big ask, man.
I
can see
know.
why she's wanted to get that basic definition.
Yeah.
There's this.
But it's the same problem that you've got for psychology, is that there's no real definition of psychology. Mercury, you just had a talk with a psychologist, and he said, this is our problem. We don't have a fixed definition of psychology. It's like, we've got all of these floating things, and I wrote down psychology as the mysticism of science. It's just like, it's just Greg.
But couldn't we embrace that as a strength? Like the way Lao Tzu said, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. And so to me, the mysticism that can be named is not mysticism.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's a definition.
We have to recognize that we're all talking words here, that it's gray. None of us mean the exact same thing by any words. Hot means something slightly different when I say it than what you hear, like, and you think of. And we can embrace that to a degree, because again, it's about getting at what's actually there. Like, yes, that you can get a lot out of memorizing all the chakra systems and, learning even who discovered it and following the history of the traditions and all of that. But also, you don't need any of that to find the chakras within you. There's just the energy. And it's the way riding a bicycle. There's that living it. And so with mysticism, with truth, to accept that we don't know exactly what this means, and also that it means more than we know it means, and that we don't even understand what we are. Like, even just, we'll define who's asking me to define that. Who exactly are you? We don't even know who exactly we are. And so to embrace the drunkenness of all of this and accept that we're all stumbling around. And I just find that can be a strength, because then you go, okay, wait, I don't need to worry so much about what everyone means by mysticism. I can just pay attention to what I'm feeling inside.
Yeah.
I can just ride the bike without worrying about what we call this movement.
Yeah. You're not reading a physics book to figure out a physics book to figure out how to ride the bike. You're just riding the bike. And that's why I've had a visceral reaction every time somebody says, well, what is love? It's just like, that's not the point. It's just like, stop asking that question. It doesn't work that way.
I know that the thing is, well, not necessarily with love, but like, I'm the one who asks the questions, because I'm like, I want to know. And it's like, well, you have to live. And it's hard when you want that definition or whatever. And it's I get though what you're saying about the practical and the lived, and
I'm not putting down the dissecting side. Like,
no, you said they're just heavy on one end. Yeah,
8 hours. I love that aspect as well. I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying we're missing the other polarity to balance.
Yeah, to balance. Yeah. So so 2 things came to mind that as you guys were talking. So, one is about, so there's this movie called Blast from the Past, and it's Brendan Fraser in his heyday. Alicia Silverstone. It's in the 90s. It's excellent.
Is that the bunker people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christopher Walken is the dad, and they do, like, he has this weird little, like, yeah. So anyway, it's where they're like, in the bunker for 30 years, because they thought a nuclear bomb went off when it was just a jet accidentally fell on their house. And she was pregnant and she had her baby, and then he's 30, and then, oh, the fallout's gone. So now we can dare go look outside, and they're in like a dark side of LA. Anyway, and so he's in the beginning of him growing up, which shows the montage of him growing up in the bunker, and he's talking to his dad about like, it's like, so then he hits the ball, and then he runs to first base, and it's like, but why does he run, father? And it's like, because he must. But why must he? You know, and then he sees a game finally, and he's like, because he must. Like, he gets it. Like, he sees it and he gets it. And so it's like that. Like, that's just a great little example of
I'm gonna start saying that. Because he must.
It's just like it's like a wonderful little example of what you're describing, of like, just live it, just do it, just like, let's not get bogged down in these details, the Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson, what is truth, and then about the being able to explain things on these different levels, and the person who can explain, like, there's a YouTube channel where you have to be able to explain a really complex idea. This particular one that I saw was on CRISPR, the technology CRISPR, you know, whatever. I don't know if you call it technology, but the biotechnology. Anyway.
It's in my book. I know about it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
So he has to explain it to I think someone in grade 3, someone in junior high, someone in high school, someone in university, someone in grad level. So but like the grade 3er, like, wow, like he did it. Like he I think he used a book, the example, like taking out the not problematic, but like, oh, there's a misprint in the book, and we rip that page out, and there now, and each, but not just that one, every single one gets ripped out. You know, he did a better job even than I am explaining, but he explained it from like the lowest to the highest. But the impressive one wasn't the highest explanation; it was the lowest explanation. That was the most impressive. So it's and that kind of is the true experts don't use the big words. You know, like it's where you can explain. You know, it takes the heart of the child to enter the kingdom of heaven. You know, so I definitely understand that. I do enjoy the words part of things, but it's also a practical, simple
balance. There has to be a balance.
And there's a wisdom. Like I'm doing the book club of reading Lilith right now, and by George MacDonald, on the Bridges of Meaning Discord, and there's a little group. The guy goes on this kind of accidental, random, otherworldly quest, and he meets a group of people called the Little Ones, and they're just children who don't grow up, very kind of Peter Pan-ish, you know. And he's like, they don't have knowledge, but they're very wise. And I thought that was interesting. It reminded me of that when you guys were talking about this. So I guess I thought of 3 things.
Well, it's something that I disagreed with Greg the other day when I watched that talk, is that he said in the middle of him talking about how it's like these children are playing with psychology and they're messing it all up. It's like, and children and gods don't mix. And I said, objection.
Wait, which talk is this? One of the ones he put up, or was this one that Mercury had?
Mercury, yeah, recently. Mercury.
Yeah, okay. Me and Ryan talked to Dr. Greg. How does he pronounce his last name? Henriques.
Oh, okay.
I keep wanting to pronounce it like the French way, Enriquez, or Enrique. But that just went up the other night on our channel. You might find it interesting. Greg's a fantastic mind. Although I can see your point, Kevin. Although I can also see his, and it's just kind of using the metaphor differently.
Yeah, I think he wasn't talking about like the wisdom of a child. He was talking about ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes more sense, because it's just like they're taking all of these ideas and completely just using their names of them and taking away all of the actual, there's like paragraphs under these names, and they're just using these names as these throwaway things, like, oh yeah, well, It's like the idea behind follow your bliss. It's just like, it's not follow your bliss. If you listen to the actual lesson on follow your bliss, it's way deeper than that, and people just throw around follow your bliss, and do whatever they want. It's like, but no, that's not what he said.
Someone explained that on your channel, Mercury. I can't remember. They were talking about Jung and Nietzsche and the dragon. Okay, like I'm kind of just rattling off like mythological symbols, but yeah, but they talked about follow your bliss in one of the videos that I can't remember. It's some professor knew about it, and I can't remember what the argument was, but I remember thinking, oh, it's not just follow your bliss, but I can't remember what it's supposed to actually be.
It's like follow your meaning. It's like and that makes a lot more sense. If that had been what he had said, we would have gotten we wouldn't have had a whole lot of like hippie.
No more eat, pray, love kind of.
Yeah.
Just,
like, and to me that reminds me of the way like if have you ever read The Neverending Story? Because the movie stops halfway through the story.
We've talked about this. I have only seen the movie, and you did tell me a little bit about the wishes.
The slogan, do as you wish, he finds written on the back of, what's it called, Orin, the medallion. It says, do as you wish. And he at first, which also you can look as do as thou will from Crowley. Like, do as thou will, where the wrong way to interpret that is do whatever the fuck you randomly think of doing. The right way to take it is to put a capital on wish or will and find your true wish. Like, find your deepest soul purpose is what that means. And so when you hear like people who are using Satan like to just denounce that God is real tend to follow the do as you will as just indulge in hedonistic pleasure. But the high magic principle of do as you will is that the goal of your life is to find your true will. And your true will is what you would call being in the body of Christ. It's you know that Christ found his true will. It's to find, and that when you find your true will, that will be so like that is also God's purpose
to align with the will of God.
And so at that point, the idea of determinism and free will is nullified because your free will becomes indistinguishable from the rest of all circumstance. And so suddenly that question of what is their free will seems ridiculous from that perspective. Because you're like, well, what do you mean? My deepest will is that thing that you're saying is doing everything to you. So it doesn't, because also at that point, you don't feel separate from the universe. It's everything is you are everything, but it's not solipsistic. Every other person is equally that. And it's like Indra's net, where every person is the infinite creator. But at that point, and that's where you learn to start asking, why is this being done to me? And you're like, okay, this is painful. I didn't want to go through a divorce. Why is this being done for me?
Right,
okay, I guess I've got to go through another breakdown. Okay, I've got to learn how to handle suicidal feelings differently. And that's the big switch for me is
because he must.
And earlier, the one thing I wanted to say is that would be, if you're living your life right, that will be the answer to everything. Why are you doing that? It should always be because I must. And it should be that you feel like you're doing the only thing you could be doing, even if it's you're taking a piss, you're eating a hamburger, you're watching a cartoon. It's because I must. This is my nature. This is I'm flowing with the Tao. Like, what else could I be doing? But what is happening now?
I want to mix that and like put it on a coin.
It's like the wave in the ocean. So also the reason I must be rambling this nonsense is because you both must be listening to it at this moment. Like, this is something we're doing together. We're the same water, just different ripples. And so everything I'm doing, you two are doing. And everything you two are doing, I am doing.
Well, the magic do as you will thing brought back a childhood memory of watching The Last Unicorn. Have you guys ever seen that?
Yeah, I've also read the book.
Okay, so
great book too.
Okay, I haven't read the book, so I don't.
I'm
know
not
as much
familiar
as
at
you.
all.
Okay,
Very
well,
similar
there's
to the cartoons. Very accurate.
yeah. Okay, so there's a magician, Schmendrick the magician, and
Mhm.
he is trying to tap into being a magician for real, not just for pretend. And that's his line is magic do as you will. And it's I mean there's some weird things. Like it turns like this like tree that he's attached to into this like weird giant breasted like old woman. And it's like, whoa, magic, what was that? But then another time I think he frees the unicorn with the magic do as you will, you know, like but I never understood why like that's the magic words is magic do as you will. Like I didn't get it.
Well, also notice the other polarity in this story is it Madame Fortuna, the witch?
Yeah, the evil witch. Yeah.
She's using magic to her will. It's never do what you will with her. It's harpy to that
Oh,
age. You be that. She's bending magic to her lower will at all
to
times.
her will.
And look at what a miserable existence that is to be that kind of magician.
Well, she was like happy for the harpy to kill her, so
Exactly. That's it.
it's
Live
like
that
Kevin, this
way,
sounds insane.
and that's the
This
kind of
sounds
joy you'll find in life at the end, as opposed to the joy of, looking on at grandchildren. That's
right.
the kind of thing you turn yourself into when it's
Okay.
magic, do as I will you to do. And when you go the
Okay.
Schmendrick route, it's like, yeah, you can look like an idiot along the way and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Is it
Accomplish
weird?
something that is for the good of everything, and you set all those unicorns free to
Yeah.
go back into all those forests. It's trusting that you don't know what the fuck you're doing and that you'll
Okay.
just do the best you can in service of upper management.
So yeah, so it's like the capital W.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've always wondered that. I love that cartoon and it's so weird. Like it's really weird. If you watched it now, Kevin, you'd be like, I mean, you might get like, I mean, because you'll probably like.
Oh, I think Kevin would enjoy it. And the butterfly is a great example of us all like talking too much about ideas. The way the butterfly comes
He's
in.
kind of like a bit of a
echoing
fool
our
himself, right? He's a bit foolish, but he actually ends up being really wise because he was the harbinger of the misfortune of all the other unicorns. This is how it starts. There's she's the last one and she's like, where are all the other unicorns? And then this weird little butterfly starts singing, do you know the Muffin Man? And then and that's actually how I learned that song. And then he kind of starts doing other weird little rhymes, and then he just tells her the truth about how they've all been stolen and they're in the sea. Anyway,
so he's entertaining himself and diverting, and then just says, "Okay, here's what's actually happening."
Yes, yeah, that's like what you actually know. You would really like, but it's very weird. It is weird though. You think, right, Mercury?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
It's super symbolic, like super. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear what you think about it. Actually,
what was that I think, was it Fantastica or something, the book that by the guy that the Inklings liked, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, their favorite author wrote something called Fantastica or something.
Is it George MacDonald or is that?
Yeah, I think that's it.
I took Fantastica is what they call Fantasia in the book.
So
in the movie, what's the other world called in the Neverending Story movie? Is it Fantasia? No.
I can't remember. I just remember
in the book, The Neverending Story, Fantastica is that alternate dimension where all of the characters are actually real, where everything that we imagine is a real place.
Oh,
that's
gosh.
Fantastica in the book.
Are you looking it up? Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. George
And
MacDonald.
then in Promethea, Alan Moore calls the same thing. Shit! I just lost it.
Well, there's so many similar other worlds.
Fantastus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I read that, and that is. I I read that, and I think I read that before I talked to Paul, and when I told him that I had read that, I said that book was deeper than I could see,
Mm.
because there's so much symbolism that it like gets bogged down in it. Like, he's telling stories that have so many layers, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you can tell what's happening, but you don't know why. The why is not there. You're just hearing this story of this guy who is terrified about the land that he found himself in, and is just witnessing all of this stuff. And at the end, it all just kind of terminates into this good ending that he's not quite sure about. And then you're like, what did I just read?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like that with Lilith, but the fact that I am doing it with the group, I think helps because we're discussing every 5 chapters.
Hmm.
So that really, really helps because like I bring up, hey, I don't get this. Oh, not just me? Cool. And then we try to decipher it. So there's like a bit of a community thing there.
But
When
the
was that
great
written?
thing-
Lilith, when was that written?
Like in like, I don't know exactly, but I know MacDonald, I think, was writing in like the late 1800s.
Hmm.
So
I think it's 1850 something. I just saw it.
okay, yeah. So but yeah, so it's like it's old. Yeah, it's definitely, but it's so you can't really tell how old it is. Like, I mean, sorry, you can because of the certain words that I have to look up. I'm
You
like,
can tell that there's an archaic
yeah,
taste
yeah.
to it.
I'm like, what's a sexton? Like, I know it's like a like I know he had to do with like a preacher type person, but I didn't know exactly.
Yeah.
It's like I looked it up, but I don't remember what it is.
It's a sailing tool. You measure the stars with it and try to
Oh
navigate
no,
with it.
it was a preacher type person, but I
Oh,
might I
as
might
a
I know what you're saying. I know what you are talking about, and maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong then. But it's like the person who dealt with the graveyard and the church. It was almost like a mix of a preacher, but also being like the undertaker along with the groundskeeper.
hmm.
Anyway, so I'm
not sure what word you're thinking of. I'm
you know
curious.
what? You
Yeah.
go read Lilith. It's in the first few chapters, and but anyways, but yeah. So it's just, well, obviously, so
Shane, a pastor?
pastor. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's something along those lines. But that's just my example. That clearly I can't remember the actual pronunciation, but it just, yeah. So you can tell by some of the words, but because it's an alternate dimension that you're in, it's kind of timeless because
Mhm.
it's outside of our modern world anyway. So that's kind of why it's so cool that MacDonald is so timeless in his writing. So anyway,
You've got your will o' the wisp out.
what I only know about that from the movie Brink.
Color changing?
Yeah,
Referring to when my cigarette tip turns like blue or purple. I don't know what it is about the camera that sometimes the color changes.
The darker it gets, the bluer it gets, and so I call it the will o' the wisp because it's like floating out in front of him as he's saying these wise things.
A lot of people have commented about that, like enjoying watching the blue cigarette tip. Something that came to mind to me, Kevin, from what we were saying, just because I know you've watched Doom Patrol, and I did the last one of Doom Patrol recently.
Yeah, so we can talk about it in its entirety now.
So one interesting moment that I found like shined for me when I watched it with the group, but I didn't notice before, and what we said today about because I must is a great answer for why you're doing what you're doing. But do you remember how there's the character Flex Mentallo?
Yeah.
Who gets brainwashed by the government. So at the point they find him, he's got long hair and the big beard. He doesn't know his name. He doesn't remember his past. And they bring him back to the mansion. They save him from the ant farm. They bring him back, and he picks up a picture of himself as Flex Mentallo. And he's like, who's this guy? And they're like, that's you. And he keeps forgetting. He keeps picking it up. And then one of the times he picks up the picture of himself, looks at it, and goes, this looks like the kind of person I'd like to be. And I thought, That's brilliant. We should all aim our lives to live in such a way that if you suddenly had amnesia and then saw like a picture of yourself, that you would think, boy, I would like to be a person like that. So it's like, it's a weird little moment in the show, but I fucking loved it that the guy with amnesia looked at a picture of himself and thought, that's the kind of person I'd like to
Hmm.
Mm.
I don't know what
Yeah.
this is, guys.
The when I was the story with him was like I was watching it at the same time I was going through all of this stuff and looking through these stories and trying to pick out good ones and things like that. And I heard about the story of Brendan Fraser and how he had kind of come back to himself in this role. I was like, that's great. I love a good redemption story. But the thing is, that was a real redemption story
be.
in this fake story. But the thing that came around with Flex Mentallo was it was just another it was another dark storyline of the hero who can't be happy.
His story's dark because he just loses the woman at the end and he's lost all that time and there's no happy ending for that character. Well, except beyond that, at least he's the kind of person he wants to be. Because imagine, because even losing all that, he's still there in service of everyone else. And if you were not happy with yourself and you lost everything, then that's where Flex Mentallo would turn into the next Darth Vader. That's when you be, you know, resentful. It's like Peterson says, that resentment, you can't let it turn to that. And Flex doesn't do that at all. He just even, and sweet, like as stupid as it is, when he goes back to Danny, the street, and just lets him know that Dolores is dead, and then he walks up and hugs that big inflatable guy, and he's just present with his sorrow, but he's still there for everyone else, and he's not corrupted because he's a genuinely good person.
Yeah.
And it's surprising what a comfort that becomes when you go through a tragedy. To be like, but at least I'm a good person. There's nothing I did that made this worse. It's a tragedy, but I don't feel guilty. It's a tragedy, but I did my best. Is much, much easier to live through than this is brutal, and deep down I know I was fucking part of making this worse. And I knew it at the time that I shouldn't do it.
Flex.
That's the advantage of cleaning up your shadow and doing the work Peterson talks about, where like, and fuck other people's rules about what you should do. But like, listen to yourself. If there's something in the back of your mind you know full well, and I think for most people, if you really pay attention, lying's a major. Like, I really advise everyone, whether you're spiritual, agnostic, because I can take it from any angle. Psychological, I can take it from any spiritual tradition. There's nothing, like, of all the commandments that you follow, that should be the first, is be honest. Because also, just by following that, you're going to have to follow the rest. It's much harder to kill people if you can't lie to cover it up. Like, you'll see that reality puts you in line. If you just try not to lie, like, you're just honest even when you're mistaken, and you aim at the good and listen when the universe corrects you, the universe will teach you everything else you need to know.
Well, what was funny is the first time I heard you call that easy mode, I was like, but that's not easy at all. It's like,
it is, once you get it going, it's like, it's hard to switch to it. But once you switch to that mode, it's like, almost imagine like a game where the first half of it, choosing to be honest, always made the quest harder for the first half. But on the second half, every time you encounter a character, they trust you and let you skip other challenges.
Yeah.
That's the way I find the vow of honesty is. Short term, it seems you've switched it to more difficult. Other people are doing small tasks more easily. But eventually, big tasks step aside. And eventually, it's easy mode once you've gone through that.
Yeah, I started to incorporate some ideas from Peterson into my book, especially the don't lie thing. But I did it kind of in a say in a tool fashion, or it's just like, because the way that he teaches Tom to be, because he's a smuggler, he's teaching Tom to be a smuggler and a thief and be kind of shady. But But the way he's teaching him is don't lie to people. It's like, why not? It's like, because if you lie, people can tell. Especially if someone's really good at telling that you're lying to them, they'll catch you in that. So,
and especially if you're a criminal, it's more important not to lie. As weird as you'd think it is, but if you're going to be a criminal, be an honest fucking criminal, because you're in a world where shit happens and people try to blame stuff. And the advantage of like whichever path you're taking, like the advantage of being honest is eventually people accept your word no matter what the fuck it looks like. And you no longer have to explain yourself. And if you've always been honest and followed through with every one of your commitments, then people don't, like, that's when they have no problem giving you the keys to their house. Or, be responsible with a knife and you can use a chainsaw. The adolescent who wants to be able to use the chainsaw with dad in the backyard, it's like, if you haven't been careful with the table utensils, you're not going to be given the chainsaw.
The story of to take a small segue back to the video games, the story of what's his name in The Witcher, Geralt.
Geralt?
Yeah, the story of Geralt. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here and say the Witcher premise and a lot of that stuff is stolen.
I'm not surprised. Most of the good ones are from
but it's
antiquity.
It's the original was a light novel series called Elric of Melbourne. But knowing you and knowing your temperament, I would not suggest it, because that character is a lot darker.
Okay.
Because like what we were talking about with taking things out of the academic thing, there's also a taking things away from being too dark so that it's palatable for the normal person. I feel like that's what the guy that did the Geralt thing did.
Okay.
He made Geralt a lot more palatable than Elric, because but the ideas I lost my train of thought.
Why are we bringing up Elric?
Yeah, I'm bringing up Elric. Because of that, the honest criminal, that kind of thing, reminded me of there's another thing that really bugs me, and that is the really obvious usurper, the guy whispering in the people's ear. Is just like, listen, that guy literally looks like a snake. Why is he advising the king? It's like the worm tongue thing. It's just like
I was literally thinking that.
He literally looks slimy.
Yeah.
And his name is Worm Tongue. Nobody's cluing into this. Like, what, really?
But is it? And I'm asking because it's been so long since I've read Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. Is that though because the king or the court or whatever was looking to harness the dark side? Like sometimes what you want is a poisonous snake because you want to know how to poison the enemy. So
I don't
is it
think
the king was looking for that kind of advisor, or is it that Worm Tongue seduced him into that?
It's the seducer trope. That's the thing. It's the snake in the tree. That kind of thing, worming your way into your head, making you ask the wrong version of the right question, and that honest criminal thing even works in there, because he could be telling you the truth and be manipulating the crap out of you. And so,
and even with the honest criminal, I mean, obviously that criminal type's going to lie to the cops. But I mean, as far as the
difference there is that he's lying to himself.
Element in your neighborhood, like, you be honest if you're going to be involved in crime, because you don't want. Honesty is a shield, and if you're going to live a dangerous life, be honest. It's armor.
And something that you brought up earlier reminded me.
What do you hear about this dark Geralt? What was that?
Elric of Melbourne?
Yeah, you brought him up.
I brought him up because near the beginning of the story, he he is the king of like this tyrant, like I think he's like some kind of elf or something. This tyrant, uh, this tyrannical kingdom. He is an emperor. He rules everything, and they have ruled for so long that the people they rule don't even remember they exist. It's like that they're that ancient, and
Mm.
so the reason I brought that up is that he gives his crown to his obvious worm tongue cousin,
Okay.
and he does it on purpose. And I hated that because he knew, and he just kept not killing him, even though they kill like every other person they come across. He kept not killing this one guy because it's his cousin, and he's like he's you know with his sister and all this other stuff. It's like, so the related, like, but they're all tyrants. They're all liars. Every single one of the kings has done something dirty, even him, and he knows it. They serve chaos gods, and this guy doesn't kill this obvious usurper, and he just goes out on his own quest. And it's just like, I hated that because the guy that had written this had set up this really believable, cruel world, and did the most unbelievable thing was not to kill the guy who's obviously trying to take your throne, and instead to just give it to him. It's like, that's not chaotic. That's just stupid.
Well, or it's just it's almost following order rather than like the order of, well, it makes sense to do this. It's hard to find how to make the obvious move not obvious, though, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the same thing that people keep bringing up with Batman. Is like, just kill the Joker already. Just kill him. You've sacrificed so many people's lives because you haven't killed this guy. And that's like the latest arc is specifically addressing that to its point and trying to get Batman to just kill off all of his bad guys because they are killing people and it's his fault.
Well, isn't that sort of the whole good guy thing, is you don't kill?
No, that wasn't a good guy thing. That wasn't that was brought in later on to be family friendly.
I mean, that's
Batman
more
used
Superman.
to kill people.
Yeah, I know that's more Superman, that he doesn't
No,
kill.
Superman used to kill people.
Oh, well, I thought it was more like Batman would get down in the dirt, in the dirty side, but Superman would be
they played that off as a trope to keep the characters around. Okay. And to be family friendly, because if they killed off the Joker, we wouldn't have the Joker anymore. You wouldn't be able to make more stories about him.
So it should have just been the one story rather than being kept around for making future stories. This is we're going back to the beginning of our talk now.
Well,
well, beings do stuff for such weird reasons. I think you could find reasons.
Yeah, you could find ways of telling the story.
Kevin?
Yeah.
You just froze for a second for me.
Oh, okay, sorry. Everything
here.
froze up for me for a minute.
Oh yeah. That's on.
We're all good now.
Yeah, you're really choppy on my screen. The way of doing that would have been, if you were telling a story like this, it would have been allow situations to occur, but don't put Batman in a position where he has an opportunity to kill the Joker until the end of whatever story you're trying to write, and do it one long story. That would have been way better than this multiverse stuff. And he would have had to kill him.
Oh, and it's a setup. The long game.
The long game, one vision idea would have been so much better.
Okay.
Even if you've got a king with counselors, that's good. But one long story. That's why, like, the Bible is one long story. You know, it it's not just it's not all just popping up here and there. It's one continual narrative, all self-referential. I love that picture that Peterson brought up in one of the
The
first talks.
hyperlink picture?
The hyperlink rainbow of all of these things. Like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
But all the way through the Bible, as much as everyone else is living and dying, Michael and Lucifer are there beginning to end. And I think that's what Joker and Batman are serving. I think it's right to kill Joker. He's representing eternal chaos. Batman's representing eternal order. And it seems to me appropriate to use those characters that way. That others live and die, but Batman and Joker don't. And I realize you have to ground it into the story, but you could find ways. Like, for instance, the way Alan Moore put into The Killing Joke, that Batman just refuses to give up on anyone. And he's still trying to save the Joker. Also, you could see Batman as being aware that he's that he's monitoring a larger criminal element than just the Joker. And the Joker could even serve a purpose of gathering all the low-level criminals so that Batman can deal with them. Like, it allows for him to target in on the problem, set the example, and every time you lock the Joker up, you've also cleaned up every active sub-criminal, and everything's calm for a while. But eventually, the snake always returns. There's going to be new kids getting interested in crime. The Joker's got to escape. He gathers all that, concentrates the infection so Batman can deal with it. And Batman could be, like, see the Joker as serving a purpose, even, of being the lens for the eternal chaos that's got to be there anyway.
See, someone did that, but not with the Joker. They did it with the Riddler. He went straight. He became a detective for a little while. There's a story, there's a plot for that. And like he gave up doing the criminal thing. He gave up he was still kind of narcissistic, but he wasn't trying to prove it all the time anymore. He went the Holmes route instead of the Moriarty route.
Oh, cool.
But you could also see the Joker as serving a purpose without making him a good guy. That as a population, we need the cathartic experience. Like, look at what's going on now with the riots and whatnot. Regardless of the reasons that are specific to the riots, part of it is we're pent up. People are upset. They need a lens to focus through. So you could look at even that recent Joker movie. That the Joker gave everyone something to focus on. That's why they ran out wearing clown masks. Is because they were like, yes, I needed this cathartic experience. And you could imagine that the Joker being on a rampage every so often would be like the way Pajot talks about you need Halloween once a year. You need a festival sometimes, and especially in certain societies where people get drunk and act stupid and you're dangerous and you flip everything upside down. There's that time where we need to vent that crap. And so the Joker could possibly, in a fictional city of Gotham, it's like maybe everyone lives with more peace of mind, all of that in between, because there's the cathartic experience of the Joker.
Well, wait, I have a question though for you, Mercury. So do you agree or disagree with Kevin with regards to the Joker and the way he's being done right now? Maybe
one?
there's, I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of the two narratives coming from both of you.
Oh, and see, I'm not trying to make sense of anything. I'm juggling different ideas all over the place.
Okay.
So I'm talking about the comic book Joker. The one he just referenced was the movie that just came out.
Okay.
Yes. And I was doing my thing of flipping frames. Like the Joker can be this, it can be this. I was just...
And Kevin, you were just saying how it could go better.
I was just giving alternate. Not even that I think that's better. Just I was just voicing possibilities.
Yeah, I was telling you how if Batman was a new character, here's how you could have done that properly. But Batman has been handed off to too many people for that to even be a possibility.
Again, having one mind, one vision for Okay. I'm curious as to what you thought of the latest Spider-Man that was the multiverse. I don't remember what it actually is called.
I think Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. That's
that one
about with Miles.
That was great.
Yeah,
That
I
was
actually really loved it, and I was hoping that you would
it was
also.
fantastic. Like it played with the multiverse thing in a fun way instead of just being this thing that we're going to throw around and be ridiculous with.
Yeah,
But the uh like I liked the dynamic that he still lost his uncle,
yeah, but he has a family. Like he has,
but he has a family.
yeah,
And
which kind of sets him a little bit apart from the rest of them coming in from the other multiverse. They all lost someone.
but his uncle was the bad guy, and like
Mm-hmm.
that's a different feeling entirely.
Mm.
And so it's just like there's a betrayal there, but there's also a redemption in like he saved him and
Mm-hmm.
he lost his life because of it. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lesson in it. In the original Spider-Man, it's with great power comes great responsibility. With this one, there's a there's a self-sacrificial tone to it, where it's like it's not so much responsibility as sacrifice. And that, like, I felt like that had a bit of a better message. And I think Mercury is frozen for us,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But
Well, hopefully you
My
I
can
loved
hear
it.
it.
It was a great movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Did you see it, Mercury? Okay.
There he
okay,
is.
am I back now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're back.
Yeah. Did you see that one?
Am I coming through? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. I did see Into the Spider-Verse, but I saw it with my kids. So rather than
Yeah.
paying close attention to the story, there was a lot of us picking which Spider-Man we were and throwing little kids around on the couch.
Okay. You should give it a watch by
Back in the
yourself.
story. But yeah, maybe I should rewatch it.
Yeah.
'Cause
It-
yeah, all my
yeah.
memories of the movie are of throwing kids around on the couch.
Are there specifics, any aspects that you wanted to bring up about that, Andrea?
Um, I think the way it just kind of came to me about the him still having his family, but not connecting with his father. Speaking of oh, there are more father son stories than I thought of actually. But but it's good. It's a good one. You know, these are cool. So he wasn't really connecting with his father super well. His dad also being a cop, um, which is kind of interesting in this time. And going to a new school, things are new. He connects with his uncle, like we were saying, but his uncle is the bad guy. I like how you brought that up. And then and the multiverse thing, I thought it was so cool having the Peter Parker. Chris Pine plays the Peter Parker who passes away because he's awesome. Like the better Peter Parker. And then the schlub Peter Parker in the other one is what's his name? He's from
Yeah.
New Girl. He plays Jake Johnson. He plays the kind of schlubby, putting on a few pounds, Peter Parker. And I love that little casting
Yeah.
choice. And I love that it was the one who was struggling that was his kind of mentor.
The mentor, yeah. Yeah. And the mentors, everybody here learns something. That's what I took away from that movie, is that each of the characters took something away from it positively. They all learned from each other. The the um the uncle became a hero at the end of his life.
Mm-hmm.
The father learned how to talk to his son better. The son learned how to engage with his dad, and and the uncle taught him how to be creative and express himself. And the father taught him about duty. And so there's lessons with every single person in there. Even some of the extra characters have something to give in that, and especially Gwen. And so there's it's not just one story, but it is, if you were to whittle it down to one story, it would be teaching each other things. And that mentorship happens with so many characters there, and the other characters come in to mentor him. It's a huge string of mentorship.
And
And
so
they
it's like
all
they're
lost
all
somebody.
I was gonna say it's like they're all following Peterson's rule of assume the person you're talking to knows something that you don't.
Well, even with
Everyone's receptive like that.
yeah, the guy who Kingpin, who's the villain in it, he lost his wife and child, and the whole problem is because he's trying to get them back, and he's not listening to anyone, and the rest of them lost people, and they would love to get them back, but they can't. And so it's like he's like, no, I refuse my way, and they're like, I will use this to learn, like you were saying, Kevin, to learn, and then they go forward and support each other.
And the split second he does get them back, he scares them.
Right.
They're terrified about him because he's not a good person, and he hasn't learned how to be a good person. Not that he hasn't learned anything.
And that's the scary, that's the real villain. I like that. It's like the real villain is learning nothing from your mistakes. And I even like that you brought up the idea of that they're all mentoring each other, because even calling that one Peter Parker, one version of him, like, oh yeah, him being the mentor, but then I was like, well, he's not the only mentor. Like, I even thought that was funny giving him the title, because it's all of them, and I thought that was
he
kind of
learned
cool.
Responsibility by being a mentor.
Maybe he'll give MJ another go, like try to give their marriage another go when he goes back.
But somebody pointed it out. I saw an analysis of this. It was fantastic. He's standing there, and you see him at the end of the movie. He wants to do that. He wants to get back with MJ, but he doesn't walk up. He doesn't walk up to the door and press the doorbell. He does the lazy thing and flips a web at the doorbell. So he's still a little bit lazy. So he's still there.
We know there's going to be a sequel, because I think that we see Gwen again at the end or something like that. Like
she opens the portal just to talk with him.
Yeah, but I don't know, that it did so well. Like, of course they're gonna make a sequel. But it was the kind of thing with the different animation styles, and the amazing music. I think that it was a bit of a risk, because it was so different, and that's when it's art. That's when, yes, they'll make money, but that's when you see really good stuff happen, when there is a risk and it's different and it's new. And I was even talking with my husband at the end. I'm like, if they tried to make this in real life, it wouldn't work. It would be less than if they did it, like the animation enhanced it and it made it amazing because of the different styles.
Well, there's a movie where they did something like that. I think it was like the major stuff that they poured into it was mostly in the introduction, and it's like I think it was Juno.
Oh, okay.
Where they kind of went all out in trying to tell the story in a certain way, but the movie that they completely changed the style. I don't know if it flopped or not, because it had so many like big people in it, but
what
it was
movie?
It is Scanner Darkly.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, exactly. It's really obscure. It's Keanu Reeves and a whole bunch of other and Robert Downey Jr. And it was before all these guys really took off in all their major stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a weird thing, because they're all in tracking suits and they're all being rotoscoped into the movie. And so the whole thing is like this wavy thing. It looks like it's all being drawn as you're watching it. All being drawn by a computer as you're watching it. It's really weird looking. But
that's cool.
But there's an artistic style that like if they had a better story, it would have worked. If they had a better title, it would have worked. But they just didn't have the story in it. But I think what they did right with that Spider-Man movie was that they made a solid story first, and then they took a risk with the art. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's just like, okay, we've got a solid foundation. Let's build off of this, and it works. because the story is fantastic and they poured a lot of their passion into the art. If you are
And the way they got playful with the art was purposeful. It wasn't gimmicky.
Right.
It applied directly to the story.
To the fact that this is extra dimensional and it's like everything is different.
Yeah. When it would glitch and be like blocky and and that he's an artist, that he himself like does tagging and spray painting and and colors and all that. That worked in the story, worked in well with the animation as well.
And even the most ridiculous one, which is the spider pig, it's just like, he still had a role to play.
Peter Parker.
Yeah. It's just like, and it brings in like, and they went full out with his cartooniness, and it works because that's how his physics works.
Right. Yeah. You know, I loved it. I showed it to my kids after my husband and I watched it, because Mercury, we wanted to like we want to see this and then we'll show the boys. And they loved it. And they were like, they didn't know I'd seen it because they watched it over at my in-laws. And they're like, Mommy, you're going to love this. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sure I will, boys. Yeah. So that was kind of cute. I actually am like, you guys don't understand, like this, like they're like, yeah, it's really good. But I'm like, no, this is really good, guys. But
I have a question for you two about that line that's become so mainstream now, but with great power comes great responsibility. Do either of you find that the average interpretation of that is actually quite shallow, and that when you think deeply on it, you're like, oh, wait a minute. With great power comes great responsibility to choose when to intervene or not. Like, where the surface level, it seems to me like everyone takes it like if you have great power, you're responsible to help as much as you can. But if you actually follow that through in your mind, you're like, well, wait, where's the line to becoming a tyrant over everyone? And where's where you're removing free will? And, so an example, I was looking for a story example in Watchmen, when the comedian's in Vietnam and the woman he got pregnant comes up to him and, says something about him taking care of their kid. And he says like, no, I'm going to fucking forget you in this rat hole country. She's like, oh, you won't forget us. And so she scars his face with the broken bottle. And the comedian turns and shoots her dead. And Dr. Manhattan's horrified and is like, you just shot a pregnant woman. And the comedian says like, yeah, and you didn't do anything to stop it. You could have turned the gun to snowflakes. You could have turned the bullets to mercury. And you just let me do it. And it makes you realize, because you take the great power a little further to Dr. Manhattan. And it's like, if he did exist, would we want him interfering? And because he can take multiple forms, he can bilocate. Do you really want Dr. Manhattan showing up and correcting all of your behavior? Like, at what point do we really want the powerful to step in?
Yeah.
That's a really good question.
And that's the painful thing that, like, I had written something down and I don't know where it is, but looking at the great author kind of idea, where can Frodo find Tolkien in Middle Earth? It's like, well, on one hand, no. On the other hand, he's everywhere. And so you upscale that to God. And I had written somewhere that if I knew that I had ultimate power, but I also knew that if I helped someone out of their horrible situation, they wouldn't grow, I wouldn't want to be that person. Like, I don't want to be God, because that means I would have to watch these people suffer for their own good. And that is terrible to watch. And
exactly. So if you had the power of God, but you also had the wisdom of God, then presumably you wouldn't change the fucking thing. Presumably that you would leave everything exactly the way it is.
Yeah. And so that makes you wonder, like, man, his will has to be so ridiculously unfathomable that I just, like, I almost don't want to know it to a degree, because it's just like there's going to be a lot of hard decisions in that. And so it's just like, I am perfectly okay with just trying to figure out, okay, what's your will for me? That's enough for me, because that's what I need. That's it. Maybe I can help somebody else through that. That's fine. I don't want to know what you want to do with the world, because there's going to be way too much pain in that. And I know I can't handle it.
Yeah, I love that. That's like a beautiful way to interact with God, because especially once you start asking God what he wants for everything else, or she, however you frame it, the problem is you're not going to understand correctly, but you're going to walk around thinking you do. And so yours is such a beautiful spiritual path, because ask questions into great mysteries and your brain will project plenty into it that you're going to hear back. So you're going to garble the message like a game of telephone. But you're like, but I fucking asked God, and I felt God, so I know I'm right. And that's when you end up walking around beating people with a stick because they're not praying properly, or, tearing children away from mothers so that you can raise them properly the way God wants. So yeah, I love seeing people walking that path you're walking, where it's like, hey, God, I know you're beyond me. That's cool. Just help me understand my little part to play in this. I want to cooperate here. I don't quite get what's going on. Give me some clues and I'll do my best. That's so much better than meeting someone who's like, hey, I know the way we should all be living. I've got this all figured out.
Yeah.
Beware the one who says, follow me.
Exactly.
Unless it's Jesus. No, well, so sorry, what were you going to say, Kevin?
No, it's what Mercury said is like, ask questions, and like ask questions out. And that's why I wanted to talk to you, Andrea, because I knew you have questions, and like you're really good at formulating questions, or at least like rattling them out, because like I don't know where your questions come from, because you've got so many and they're usually fantastic.
Oh, you're so kind. Wow. Like, oh no, but continue. No,
that's a great clip for your channel. That 30 seconds on its own.
Yeah, a little soundbite. No, I've actually realized this. I'm actually not. It's not that I'm a bad interviewer. I'm the only reason why my interviews work is because I only ask people to talk with, or who I speak with, where I have it, like, well, an angle where I'm like, I don't get this and I want to understand it. Like, I actually like, I will not have a good interview unless I am like burning with, I need to know this. So I like, there are some people I don't actually want to interview because I don't have an angle for them, so for me, some people are interviewers are very skilled at like pulling things out of their who they're speaking with, but I'm not in that category, in my opinion. I am more, I have to, and some people might be like, well, that's how it is for everyone, but there are some, I think, who can find even for something that they're not super interested in, but it's their job. So like if they work for, broadcasting corporation, that they might be good at that. But for me, I have to really be like, I need to know this. And I there are certain subjects that I pursue, like the meaning and how do you find meaning? And I'm looking for within and without religion. I want to know people's perspectives on how they find their meaning and what they strive for. That's kind of where I'm at a little bit. I do some more sciencey, intellectual dark web type stuff, in the beginning, but and throughout. But I really kind of switched gears over to meaning because that's where I'm really interested in, and that's what that's why I was so happy to speak with Pajot, because I have so many questions, as you saw, for him, because then Mercury was so kind to just let me go, let me loose. Because I have things where I feel disgruntled inside, because I'm like, but how? Why? So that's why I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I ran into somebody preaching about like be careful with mysticism, and it's like I understand the angle that they were coming at that with, because the mysticism he was talking about was extremely like new agey, kind of weird.
Hmm.
And then I also ran into the quote that, you know, mysticism, without mysticism, you know, Christianity would die off. It's just like, okay, well, what does that mean if we've got Christians preaching against mysticism and then trying to be mystics at the same time? And so I've wanted to ask Pajot, like, is the like I ran into a book because I had typed in the question I want to ask Pajot. Is there non-heretical mysticism? Like I searched that non-heretical mysticism because like I have no other way of saying that. And I got shunted off to this book called Protestant Mystics. I'm like,
yeah, I saw that. I didn't get
yeah.
a chance to look at it, but yeah, you shared that one.
And in there, I think you could mostly get the gist out of it just out of reading the introduction. The introduction is like 37 pages or something. It's not the first part that you read. That's like a preface or something. But the introduction is written by somebody else that is not the person who compiled this book. And the way that they go through mysticism, or at least the ideas of it is, here's the situations in which these mystical experiences look a lot more like just some kind of psychosis, and here's the situations at which this lines up biblically with what would likely happen, and that kind of thing. It's like, oh, okay, so there's kind of a roadmap of what you would probably come into, where this is a mystical experience and it's not something else trying to trick me. And so hearing a story like that, I was just like, okay, so this doesn't have to just die on the vine. This is actually something people can pursue and try to study. And then listening to the examples that he brought forward, I went, oh my gosh, Peterson had a mystic experience. His and not the one that's like, this is clearly a psychosis one. This is a real one, like based off of the other examples. Like, this makes sense, because the one that he said he had in his study while he was carving that big symbol, listening to music, he looked up at the ceiling, and it was like the ceiling opened up, even though he knew he was just looking at the ceiling. And that's the number one clue, is if you're seeing it with your eyes, you're not seeing the right thing. Because if you're seeing it with your eyes, it's not a real mystical experience. That's some kind of chemical or something. If you're seeing it without your eyes, something's going on. And he saw it. He knew he was just staring at the ceiling.
It's looking through the third eye.
Yeah, he saw it. It was like the ceiling opened up, and this light came down. It asked him a question. I don't know what the question was, but it asked him a question, and he said, I can't do that.
That he couldn't function in the world in that state.
People would treat me weirdly. He would lose status in his institution and all this stuff. And then he said, and it went away sad. And every time I go over that story, that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, because like, man, I would want that experience. But at the same time, I kind of don't, because there's other sides of that experience, which is the Messiah complex, where you get exposed to these ideas out of the blue as an aha moment, and then suddenly you think that you're better than everybody else, or that you have this, yes, like what Shane said, you have this responsibility that to give this message out that you received from a higher power. It's just like,
And like I was caught in that is why I was
Yeah.
describing it earlier. Like my first 6 years of being insane, I was doing it the wrong way. I was absolutely like, I put my messianic subpersonality in place. I understand that's a metaphor, that it's
Yeah.
myself I have to save now. So I've learned going further, but I would strongly say when you hear that like criticism of, ooh, be careful with mysticism, like, yeah, be careful with mysticism. But also when you do it properly and you get into some deep answers, you'll be like, oh shit, guys, be careful with everything. Like every one of your thoughts, every one of your movements. It's not just in here in the mysticism. You guys are interacting with this all the time and you just don't know about it. Like, so you come back going, not only be careful with mysticism, but like, be careful
with thinking.
Be careful how you buy milk at the corner store. Be careful how you step on an ant. Be careful what you daydream about. Be careful how you turn your attention.
Be careful with who you tell your dreams to.
Yes, all of it. And you're like, oh, shit, be careful with everything. Yeah. Because this part isn't detached from all that mystical, dangerous, chaotic gods and angels and all those realms. It's not like that's separate. It's a semi-porous membrane. It overlaps and it affects one another.
And in that introduction, he went into this analysis of love, you know, and I kind of rolled my eyes. I'm like, what? This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But he comes back around on it and starts talking about relationships, because he was doing the biblical thing of like going on like the traditional ideas about marriage and all this stuff. And it's just like, why are you bringing this up? And it had to do with relationships and relationship with God and relationship, and it's all mirroring itself. And his explanation of it went all the way through with the mystical, the mysticism ideas and that kind of stuff. Is there is a proper balance and a relationship, and when you are in a proper relationship, like what Mercury brought up earlier, of your will and God's will, if you're in alignment, there's nothing, like the question of free will is kind of silly. And so if you're in alignment with your spouse, the question of do you love me is kind of silly. And if you line up with your fellow man or that kind of stuff, it's like, do you love them? That question's silly. It's like we're all lining up in these ways, and it's like these, and so like the, and that's why I have that reaction to what is love. It's just like that. Okay, here's how I would describe it. Line up with that which you would say, I love that person, and that's love.
Well, it kind of brings me back to Mercury's question about the great power, great responsibility thing. Kind of like, how do you love, like how to love people? I think of the power and the responsibility. I think that I apply that even in being a mother to my children. It's a micro version, but I very much am in that like hierarchical role above, where I have to watch them go out into the world and help shelter until it's harmed. Like I don't want to harm them by sheltering. I need to like slowly pull it back until at the right time. And so to me,
that's like Jonathan Haidt's work. And so it seems also
right,
God
the coddling, God
doesn't step in too much. And I think that's how you would see it, Kevin, when you were like, I almost wouldn't want to understand it from that perspective. Is it gets up to where it's like Haidt, though, where
but God I feel like I do. Like
God doesn't feel like God's abandoning us when we feel like God's abandoning us. God understands it's peekaboo. And so when we panic under the blanket, God doesn't worry. He just knows that the blanket's coming down and you're going to laugh.
Well, and that's what I feel like.
So the horrors don't.
Yeah, but it's hard. It's a very hard dichotomy of allowing them to grow and pushing and but then also helping and saving at times, you know. And of course there's having my husband, my husband also their father. It sounds weird being like my husband, like he is also their dad. It sounds weird being like my husband there to help them. Sorry, they're like having like, you know, oh, mommy and daddy are both working together, and Josh kind of comes along and helps push them a little further than I would, and I try to step back until I need to step in, where I say, okay, let's maybe, you know, rein it in. But that's something that it's a sort of like you do need to see that there's the great power comes great responsibility. It's where to put the hand and where to withdraw it and where to have it in between. Like that's how it feels. And I'm even thinking about people on social media. Like right now, J.K. Rowling is being canceled, and because something about talking
for the fourth time.
Yeah, it's the same statement, but for some reason it's getting drawn up again about trans people, and I think she said women are women or something along those lines.
She wanted to be validated as a woman or whatever,
or something like that. But anyway, she's getting so much hate, and I think that it's the mob, and it's like we need to see that each little individual section of people, one person online, you do actually have great power when you are online on Twitter or on wherever. You actually, you don't think you do, but you actually, like now, against even like celebrities or great authors, like as for her, you know, you actually do have great power that you're not taking any responsibility for. You're not thinking about what this little ripple is going to turn into a typhoon. And some people have more of a following than others, and so some have more responsibility. But I do think we need to take more responsibility for ourselves, because online you do actually have quite a bit of power, more than we used to, the average person.
I think there's another side of it to where people can read that as, I don't have any power, that means I don't have any responsibility.
Yeah, well, maybe that's how they feel online. It feels like they're acting like that. Yeah,
and there's also the dichotomy of nobody actually knows who you are, and so it just gives you a whole lot of freedom to say anything that you want.
Yeah, it's being treated as if it doesn't matter, especially if you're anonymous. But it actually just really does matter. Maybe does that even make sense that I added
it
that
matters.
part in?
It matters because if nobody else sees it, you have. And so if you're saying something that
some algorithm
or the algorithm, if you're saying it, if you're putting it out into the world, you know you've said that. And it doesn't matter if anybody else has read that. So if you lie and nobody else hears that lie, you still lied to yourself.
And there's a thing about taking responsibility that people are not taking responsibility for their actions, especially online. But those are the two ideas that came into my head with the great power comes great responsibility, of the really practical example of parenting and for me, motherhood. And then everyone who's online who doesn't seem to really be taking that responsibility.
And I would take it further, like from my nonsense mystical perspective. I would say even someone without an internet connection has powers they're not aware of. It does matter what you think. It does matter what you feel. You have the ability to manipulate reality, like the way, you know, some gurus and shit at least like believe that they can positively affect the world by achieving a certain state of consciousness and just energetic, like just emitting it out into the world. Like from what I've seen of how the universe works, our minds are something real. Our subjective experience is not an illusion. It's perhaps more real than the real world. It connects to shit. And it does matter what you're thinking. Like, even if you behave properly, but you're constantly imagining stabbing your partner in the neck while they sleep, like, that matters.
Yikes.
Even if they don't know you're thinking it.
Yeah, I think you mentioned this when I interviewed you, Mercury, about like the different realities that we can just by framing.
We have a lot.
People can be in the same room but have very different realities existing.
You can be in the same room, and in fact, my experience of this conversation, reality shifted a number of times.
Oh, well, you're more in tune than we are. Okay.
When we were on certain subjects, I was very grounded. The couch felt very real to me in the way the couch feels real to everyone. Other times when I got talking mystical nonsense and it felt like my wings unfolded or my third eye opened, then suddenly the couch felt very unreal. Both of you, it's the images on the screen don't seem very real. Those seem like a cartoon avatar. That's very
cool.
simple.
How does mine look? I like those.
And then I'm interacting with this thing behind it that I'm sensing. Like the times when I was telling you guys that I thought, you walked your path in a certain way, and that, I wasn't seeing you the way I was seeing you 20 minutes earlier. My reality was shifted.
Cool.
And I'm in like an in-between state right now, where my third eye's like half open. And your face seems a little silly, both of you, like, or even mine. It's like, those are masks. I'm seeing through them a little.
Snidely whiplash over here.
Well, that's funny. I mean, I guess when we were talking about the Into the Spider-Verse, I got like goosebumps because I was like, I love it.
But even just notice when you're really sad or really happy, you're in a different place. You suddenly hear bad news. I'm not sure what it'll be for your experience, but for a lot of people, it's like colors aren't quite as bright. It's hard to describe. Smells that are good aren't as good. Even good food doesn't taste good when you're in a bad mood. And we think of that like, oh, I'm different. But the reality is, like Donald Hoffman says, we have no idea what we're doing when we're eating. That's all an interface. So everything you think of as reality isn't. And so it's just as reasonable to say, no, reality changed. Pizza wasn't as good last night because I was in a dimension where pizza doesn't taste as good. Or like often in the Twilight Zone that happens, where you're still in the same location, but suddenly a certain law of physics or a certain aspect of reality has changed. And it's like, oh, you're in a parallel dimension that's slightly different, or the upside down or whatnot. It's just as valid, I think, to frame our experience that way, as I am in a constantly shifting reality. I move from dimension to dimension, and there's obviously something real underneath anchoring this, but I'm not in the real thing. I'm always in one of its reflections, one of its sub-dimensions, and I'm constantly traveling through those just by shifting state. And you can at any moment, and like to bring it back to, and that's what I see in when Christ says, the kingdom of God is laid before the eyes of men, yet they do not see. It's everywhere. Tune yourself in right, and you can be in hell. Hell overlaps this dimension. And you'll see the demons that are there. It's almost like tuning the radio to tune into the death metal song coming through. You can tune yourself where you'll perceive the demons that are here. Or you can tune yourself to the heaven that is here. It's all there, just like all the radio waves in the air that you can tune into.
It's like having eyes to see or ears to hear. Like those, that's the same kind of idea I have for, even like I probably couldn't have read Lilith and understand what little I do. I couldn't have even comprehended it. I could have read the words and I would have been like, what nonsense is this? Not because I don't like it, but I don't think I could have gotten anything out of it until now. So it's kind of like I get what you're saying about the different spaces we're in, dimensions and
Like
whatnot.
to a person who's colorblind, like really, they're in a dimension where just color doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
It's just as real to frame it that in their dimension. And so I perceive it as we are each the center of the universe, because that's what consciousness does, is take something that's perhaps infinite potential, chaos, is manifested into something by conscious experience. So while I exist, the universe exists from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, there's 3 different universes interacting right now. And I exist in both of your universes, but I'm different in both of those universes. You both know different things about me. So I have a different backstory in both of your, if you were books, I'm a character in both of your books, but with a slightly different history. And so to me, you're the center of your own universe. And a rose only smells the way a rose smells to me in my universe. I actually generate that. And in that way, I'm almost like a single taste bud of the universe, choosing to experience itself this way. And in my universe, this cup is right beside you. In your universe, this cup is miles away. But we're 3 universes overlapping. We each generate them simply by being aware. And that's that power, the consciousness of blank awareness, consciousness just that experiences, that generates a universe. And it's a taste bud for the greater mind.
Something that I noticed, as far as like the perception of other people, or the minds of other people and the stories of other people, it's just like when we lost Voth, everything kind of shrunk into perspective, and I was just like, what if my neighbor died? Like we went on a trip a few months ago, and my neighbor fell over in his garage. We don't know what happened. We just saw lights out in front, and there was a fire truck. I'm like, what's going on? My neighbor had died. I had no idea. I didn't know the guy. I don't think I think I'd seen him twice. And my parents had talked to them once or twice. And I'm like, why do I feel weird about that? Like, because they died, and then we went on a trip, and I was thinking about it the whole time. And I came back. I'm like, why do I feel completely uneasy, like I missed something? And knowing Voth, and talking to him and getting insight from him, like we're each we're an encyclopedia Britannica. We have novels that could fill a wall in our head, and you know, it's almost not enough that Voth wrote a book. It's just like there was so much more to that. But at the same time, losing him made me realize how important each and every one of us are. It's just like, my gosh, that you hear that somebody died down the street, and it's just like, man, that sucks. You hear somebody died next door, it's like, man, that really sucks. Why do I feel bad about that? But like, I didn't know him. It shouldn't affect me that much.
But it would be the same. Don't you find you have the same thing if some business closes, you never went there? Like, you never tried that restaurant.
Yes, exactly. The KFC just down the street got switched out for some taco joint. And I'm like, I wanted to go to that KFC. Why didn't I? And you get this pile up of regrets of people that you never interacted with. And somebody had said the other day, the moment you avoid somebody, you deny your own humanity. Like, wow, there's an entire human being you didn't experience. And
Well, that's a lot of
But it's
responsibility.
ultimately
Man.
like that with everything.
yeah,
And you can get caught up in that. Like my mind could start spinning on everyone else in the world I could be talking to other than you two.
Mm-hmm.
If one of you died tomorrow, I'll be like, fuck. That was my last time talking to Kevin, and I was thinking how I could have been talking to Jonathan Haidt or Alan Moore, or why wasn't I present with that?
yeah.
So you can also come right back around to the Eckhart Tolle. You've got that every moment of now.